Dreams. The morning mist hung low over Silver Lake, its tendrils reaching out across the still water like ghostly fingers. Sarah stood at the edge of the weathered dock, her toes curling around the rough wood as she gazed at the ethereal scene before her. The early autumn chill sent a shiver down her spine, but she made no move to return to the warmth of the lakeside cabin behind her. This place, with its serene beauty and the memories it held, was the perfect setting for her journey of self-discovery. This place held too many memories and dreams that had slipped away like sand through her fingers. Yet here she was again, drawn back by some inexplicable force she couldn't quite name. As the sun began peering through the trees, casting golden light across the water's surface, Sarah closed her eyes and let the memories wash over her. She thought of Michael, of the summers they'd spent here together, of the promises they'd made under starlit skies. Those days seemed like a lifetime ago, faded and worn like an old photograph. With a deep breath, Sarah opened her eyes and turned back towards the cabin. It was time to face the ghosts of her past, to confront the dreams that had led her astray and the reality she'd been running from for far too long. The cabin's interior was as she remembered it, rustic and cozy, with the faint scent of pine and wood smoke lingering in the air. Sarah ran her hand along the back of the worn leather couch, remembering lazy afternoons curled up with a book while the rain pattered against the windows. She made her way to the small kitchen, automatically reaching for the coffee pot. As she went through the familiar motions of brewing a pot, Sarah's mind wandered to the last time she'd been here. Nearly 5 years ago, on that fateful weekend, everything had changed. The coffee's rich aroma filled the air, grounding Sarah in the present moment. She poured herself a mug and carried it onto the cabin's wraparound porch, settling into one of the old rocking chairs that had always been her favorite spot. As she sipped her coffee and watched the mist slowly dissipate from the lake, Sarah let her mind drift back to that summer when she was just 22. Fresh out of college and full of dreams, she'd come to Silver Lake with Michael, her college sweetheart and the man she thought she'd spend the rest of her life with. They talked about their future, about the life they'd build together. Michael had grand plans, a successful career in the city, a beautiful home, and exotic vacations. Sarah had nodded along, caught up in his enthusiasm, even as a small voice in the back of her mind whispered that perhaps their dreams weren't entirely aligned. Sarah had always imagined a simpler life filled with quiet moments and small joys. She dreamed of a cozy home, a garden full of flowers and work that fulfilled her soul, rather than just her bank account. But Michael's dreams were big and bold, and Sarah had allowed herself to be swept along in his current. It wasn't until that last weekend at Silver Lake that Sarah finally found the courage to voice her doubts. The resulting argument had been explosive, leaving them both raw and wounded. Michael had stormed off, driving back to the city in a fury, while Sarah had remained at the cabin, crying herself to sleep in the bed they'd shared just hours before. The following day, she'd packed her bags and left Silver Lake behind, determined to prove to Michael and herself that she could embrace his vision for their future. She'd thrown herself into a high-powered job in the city, working long hours and sacrificing her desires to pursue a dream that had never been hers. For 5 years Sarah had lived that life. She'd achieved the success that Michael had always talked about, but the cost had been high. Her relationship with Michael had ended not long after that fateful weekend, unable to recover from the cracks that had been revealed. And though Sarah had gone on a few dates since then, she'd never allowed herself to get too close to anyone, too afraid of losing herself in someone else's dreams again. Now, as she sat on the porch of the Silver Lake cabin, Sarah felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. Coming back here had been difficult but necessary. It was time to confront the choices she'd made and the dreams she'd abandoned. Sarah, who had left this place 5 years ago, was a different person, unsure and lost. But the Sarah who returned was stronger, more determined, and ready to embrace her true self. Setting her empty coffee mug aside, Sarah stood and made her way back down to the dock. The mist had cleared now, revealing the lake's sparkling glory. She took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the crisp autumn air, and decided it was time to start over, to rediscover the dreams she'd set aside all those years ago. Sarah knew it wouldn't be easy. Leaving behind the life she'd built in the city would be challenging. But as she stood there, looking out over the peaceful waters of Silver Lake, she felt a sense of certainty settle over her. This was where she belonged. Not in a high-rise apartment or a corner office, but here, surrounded by nature and the simple beauty of a life lived on her terms. With renewed purpose, Sarah returned to the cabin and began to make plans. She spent the next few days exploring the area, reacquainting herself with the small town nearby and the natural wonders surrounding Silver Lake. She hiked through forests ablaze with autumn colors, canoed across the lake's tranquil waters, and spent evenings stargazing from the cabin's porch. As the days passed, Sarah felt a transformation taking place within her. The stress and tension that had been her constant companions in the city began to melt away, replaced by a profound sense of peace and contentment she hadn't experienced in years. She was finally living a life that was truly hers. One afternoon, while browsing the local bookstore shelves, Sarah struck up a conversation with the owner, a kind-faced woman named Eleanor. As they chatted, Sarah opened up about her situation, the dreams she'd set aside, and her desire to make a change. Eleanor, with her gentle wisdom and understanding, became a guiding light in Sarah's journey of self-discovery, showing her that it's never too late to change course. Eleanor listened with understanding, her eyes twinkling with wisdom. "You know," she said, "it's never too late to change course. Sometimes our dreams when we're young aren't meant to be our forever dreams. Life shows us new paths if we're brave enough to follow them." Her words resonated with Sarah, filling her with a renewed sense of hope and determination. Those words stayed with Sarah long after she'd left the bookstore. As she sat on the dock watching the sun set over Silver Lake that evening, she decided she would not return to her life in the city. Instead, she would stay in this place that had always felt like home and build the life she'd always dreamed of. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Sarah gave notice at her job, arranged for her apartment to be sublet, and began making Silver Lake her permanent home. She found a small cottage for rent on the outskirts of town, its wildflower-filled garden and cozy rooms precisely what she'd always imagined for herself. As autumn gave way to winter, Sarah settled into her new life. She worked part-time at Eleanor's bookstore, spending her days surrounded by the stories she'd always loved. In her free time, she began to write, pouring her experiences and emotions onto the page in a way she'd never allowed herself to before. The town embraced Sarah as one of their own, and she formed more profound and genuine friendships than any she'd had in the city. Tom, the gruff but kind-hearted owner of the local diner, would slip her extra pie with a wink. And Maria, a fellow transplant from the city who'd moved to Silver Lake to open an art gallery, quickly became Sarah's closest confidant. As the seasons changed, Sarah's life took on a new and familiar rhythm. She watched the lake freeze over in winter, marveling at its crystalline beauty. She planted her first garden in spring, delighting in each new bloom. Summer brought long, lazy days spent by the water, reminiscent of those she'd enjoyed many years ago. It was sometimes challenging. There were moments of doubt, when Sarah questioned her decision to leave behind the life she'd worked so hard to build. But in those moments, she'd take a walk by the lake or lose herself in the pages of a book, and remember why she'd chosen this path. 1 year after her return to Silver Lake, Sarah sat on the dock, watching the sunset just as she had on that first day back. As the sky blazed with vibrant oranges and pinks, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She thought of Michael and the dreams they'd once shared, feeling a pang of nostalgia but no regret. Those dreams had led her here in a roundabout way, and for that she was grateful. Sarah's dreams had evolved over the past year. She was nearly finished with her first novel, a story of self-discovery and second chances that drew heavily from her experiences. The small editing firm she'd started was beginning to gain traction, allowing her to combine her city-honed skills with her love of storytelling. But more than any tangible accomplishment, Sarah was proud of the person she'd become. She'd learned to trust her instincts, to pursue the things that truly made her happy, rather than what others expected of her. She'd found a balance between ambition and contentment, between dreaming big and appreciating the small moments. Sarah stood and stretched, as the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the trees. She took one last look at the peaceful waters of Silver Lake, before turning back towards her cottage. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, dreams to pursue, and moments to cherish. But for now, Sarah was precisely where she was meant to be, living a uniquely, beautifully her own life. As she walked home under a sky full of stars, Sarah smiled, feeling a sense of peace and possibility that she'd once only dreamed of. In the soft glow of her porch light, Sarah paused momentarily, taking in the quiet beauty of her surroundings. The gentle lapping of the lake, the whisper of wind through the trees, the distant call of a night bird, these were the sounds of home, of a dream realized. As she stepped inside her cottage, Sarah felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. She proved that it's never too late to change course and pursue the dreams that genuinely resonate with your soul. And though the path hadn't always been easy, every twist and turn led her to this moment of contentment and promise. Sarah closed the door behind her, ready to embrace whatever dreams tomorrow might bring. She had learned the most valuable lesson, that the most accurate dreams are not about destination, but the journey of becoming who you're meant to be.